Hello, and welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All, episode 74, The Times of Novel Utility question. Anyway, so we had our preview on Wednesday. It went fairly well. It was a very interesting episode. And here we are. Series of ruminations we do once a week, early Sunday morning, to our friends. And I want to thank everyone. It's kind of been really cool. It seems as if in the last short while, things have really started to kind of take off. And I find myself actually, one of the benefits is the kind of conversations like the one I had today at the Met with two good friends of mine about things related to the stream that end up becoming kind of part of the thought process. Again, these are, to me, this format of kind of speaking is how I kind of think through these ideas. Again, a lot of these ideas have been, kind of banging around my empty head for decades in some cases, and kind of like now they get the chance to kind of like be kind of talked about. But what's interesting, Julie and I have the conversation on the way home. She had talked about, hey, we should talk about this. I said, we've done that. But I think what's interesting is you go back to a topic because you feel as if there's a deeper insight that you need to kind of expose. And I think that's kind of one of the things that we're doing. So anyway, we're here following up on last week about the idea of our activities. And what I mean by novel utility is very simple. Novel means new and kind of intriguing, and utility is use. So it's like a use that is new and intriguing. Now, one of the things that I think happens is that sometimes culture and art doesn't understand from where these things come from. And as a result, I feel that there's a kind of like interest in kind of seeing that in terms of how the ages turn into each other. So fortunately for me, unfortunately for you guys, I found the piece I was looking for. And in Emerson's Nature essay from 1936, not the one from 1944, he starts, and I will read the entire introduction, it's one page, but it really talks about where I think we are in terms of the kind of institutional inertia of which we're kind of fighting about. Our age is retrospective. It builds the sepulchres to the fathers. It writes biographies, histories, and criticism. The foregoing generation beheld God and nature face to face. We through their eyes. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should not we have a poetry, a philosophy of insight and not of tradition, and a religion of revelation to us and not the history of theirs? And blossomed for a season in nature, whose floods of the streams around and through us, and invite us by the powers they supply to action proportioned to nature. Why should we grope among the dry bones of the past, or put the living generation into masquerade out of its faded wardrobe? The sun shines today also. There is more wool and flax in the field. There are new lands, new men, new thoughts. Let us demand our own work and laws and worship. Undoubtedly, we have no questions to ask which are unanswerable. We must trust the perfection of the creation so far as to believe that whatever curiosity the order of things has awakened in our minds, the order of things can satisfy. Every man's condition is a solution in hieroglyphic to some inquiries he would put. He acts it as life before he approaches it as truth. I'm going to say that again because that's huge. He acts it as life before he apprehends it as truth. This harkens back to self-reliance. Self-reliance is the declaration of the individual. Nature is the declaration of the task of the individual in his circumstance. He acts in life before he apprehends it as truth. In like manner, nature is already in its forms and tendency describing its own design. Let us interrogate the great apparition that shines so peacefully around us. Let us inquire, to what end is nature? All science, one aim, namely to find a theory of nature. We have theories of races and of functions, but scarcely yet a remote approach to an idea of creation. We are now so far from the road to truth that religious teachers dispute and hate each other and speculate. And speculative men, he said speculative men or speculists, right, are esteemed unsound and frivolous. But to a sound judgment, the most abstract truth is the most practical. Whatever a truth appears, it will be its own evidence. Its test is that it will explain all phenomena. Now, many are thought not only explained, but inexplicable as language, sleep, dreams, beasts, sex. Philosophically considered, the universe is composed of nature and the soul. Strictly speaking, therefore, all that is separate from us, all which philosophy distinguish as the not me, that is both nature and art, or as Ortega would say, myself and my circumstance, in a universal case. Nature is enumerating the values of nature and casting up their sum. I shall use the word in both senses, in its common and its philosophical import. In inquiries so general as our present one, the inaccuracy is not material. No confusion of thought will occur. Nature, in the common sense, refers to essences unchanged by man. Space, the air, the river, the leaf. Art is applied to the mixture of his will with the same things as in a house, a canal, a statue, a picture. But his operations taken together are so insignificant, a little chipping, baking, patching, and washing, that in an impression so grand as that of the world on the human mind, they do not vary the result. That's is a call to arms. It's a call to genius. It's a call to the spirit of intuition, of inspiration, of desire, of the passions of the group. And I think right now, from my conversation this afternoon, there is something that I've seen is the fact that the institutions that basically are the training grounds for the generations of the arts and the sciences are no longer dispensing compelling formula or compelling question. And as a result, there's a dissatisfaction among the interested and the enlightened to kind of go off on their own, as has happened and happens in history when institutions become inertial. So with that long introduction, welcome. And the most important part of the show, what's new in Julie?
Thanks. Only half my face is on. Are you able to slightly angle? I don't have anywhere to move.
There we go.
Wow, thanks.
Look at you.
I've never been on with my entire face.
Mm-hmm.
I only have half my face on. She has her whole face on.
Yes. That's Penguel. Actually, Penguel is a descendant of the Güell family in Barcelona that were the patrons to Gaudí. That's where she's Penguel. She's actually, no, it's true.
Was she born in Güell Park?
She's played in Güell Park, right? I mean, she kind of like.
So I.
So well, I have it.
No, I actually have.
I mean, Gaudí is like somebody we could easily talk about tonight, given where we are talking. But anyway, what's new in Julie? Talk to us.
Plenty.
Good.
Well, yesterday I finished this drawing, which I will get from the plinth, which is right over here. Can you hold it up?
Yes, I will.
Do you have a free hand?
I have.
So this is my drawing that I finished at the Met yesterday evening. A little bit of glare. There is a lot of Derwent British metallic colored pencil on here as well. but I do layer it with graphite, which also when you use graphite in layers and you go from HB to 2B to 4B, there can be quite a silver shine, much like a harvest moon. Are you able to zoom in close, maybe?
What do you want to see?
Oh, that looks nice.
Okay.
The details, because the
Mhm.
dimensionality, nice. So what you are looking at here, and the title of my drawing here is Lignification of the Writing God. And for those of you unfamiliar with lignification, it is the hardening or strengthening and making brittle usually in this case bamboo. It's applied to plant matter and plant science, and this is a plant science drawing. So what I'm doing is I'm visualizing a fascinating morphological process in all bamboo, whereby they shed the bulk of their sugars or carbohydrates, which makes young bamboo shoots not sweet. They are never sweet, but palatable upon the human tongue, hence a delicious stir fry like shredded pork in a garlic sauce with bamboo. And why you absolutely cannot eat or chew through old bamboo. You would literally rip up your mouth and your gums and what would be left of your teeth.
Unless you're a panda.
Unless you are a panda. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what happens is the microstructure alters dramatically in the progressive aging stages and the growth and the maturity of bamboo. And at one point, it actually assumes the pattern, not like a cherry blossom, almost exactly like cherry blossoms. And the pattern is a repeating pattern. It's a glorious spring flower pattern. And you will see, I can hold this up in my drawing. The pattern is this. So these may look like actual cherry blossoms, which I actually morphed them into. This is a sort of half and half state, a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Cherry Blossom, if you will, where you'll see I use scanning electron micrographs as some of my research, and it's based on what this actually looks like. Cutting through an Edo period lacquered bamboo-shaped, bamboo-inspired and designed writing box that's in the Japanese wing at the Met, and it is cutting through like hard to get my finger in here. Oh, like a table saw. So something that is delicate and faint and beautiful and fragile does assume the cutting and serrated quality of a table saw.
Right. And there's a line in Exotica where they were talking about the incredibly beautiful birds of the Amazon, I think. And he said, just because something is beautiful, don't assume it's frail.
True, that is an excellent line. Yeah. And then it morphs into the blossoms, and then a Japanese show musical instrument rises out of the inkstone in the middle in a crash of waves, and the whole thing is greatly animated. So that's what I finished.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the last week and this week and also next week are a series of questions. And, it's about what are our constitutional circumstances? What is the situation that we live ourselves in? Another thing that I kind of was talking about this week, and I'll kind of read it because I think it was important, comes from the Century of Genius. And what it says is,
just grabbing a tissue.
You will observe that I do not hold induction. No, wait. Oh, wrong page. Wrong reference. Okay. All right. This formula contains the repudiation of a belief that had blocked the progress of physics for 2,000 years. It also deals with a fundamental concept which is essential to scientific theory. I mean the concept of an ideally isolated system. This conception embodies a fundamental character of things without which science, or indeed any knowledge of this part of finite intellects, would be impossible. The isolated system is not a solipsist system apart from which there would be nonentity. It is isolated as within the universe. This means that there are truths respecting this system which require reference only to the remainder of things by way of a uniform systematic scheme of relationships. Thus, the conception of an isolated system is not the conception of substantial independence from the remainder of things, but of freedom from casual, contingent dependence upon detailed items within the rest of the universe. Further, this freedom from casual dependence is required only in respect to certain abstract characteristics which attain to the isolated system, and not in respect to the system in its full concreteness. So, one of the things that I think happens too often is that individuals and things exist without context. The context is essential. So, the constituent of the circumstance is, in fact, what is that which the things that are these suppositions, these isolated systems, give rise to their consequence. So, what are our constitutional circumstances? Societally, architecturally, culturally, artistically, what are they? Do we understand them? Do we recognize them? And what is it that's within the institutions where the institutions are not recognizing this, not making kind of like consequential statements or posing consequential questions? Say,
Okay.
that's a lot.
I
I thought that was huge.
I think that it is
Yes,
huge.
we're on the verge of a new time, P. Aren't we, Penguin? Penguin agrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, say.
I was waiting until you were done.
Say.
Okay, well, I was going to bring up when a god or goddess is repurposed, actually.
There's a guy, Manny. He's around the corner. He repurposes a lot of things, and he does
funny.
gods and goddesses and upholstery.
I thought it was Fords and Chevrolet.
He does that too. He does some really nice upholstery work. He also is like, his wife does like handbags and stuff.
I thought she was an anti-Macassar goddess.
She was.
Anywho.
Once.
No, you can't keep it up or you'll start to unravel.
Oh, guys.
Anyway, I believe, I will discuss when a god or goddess is repurposed, reimagined, reinvented to conform to human utilities, mortal needs, and to satisfy novel human utilities. You have a god that is constantly shifting, flickering, changing all the time, morphs, assumes many different guises, transformations. You could say that the ancient Greek and Roman gods, I mean, all of the myths are full of shapeshifters and deceptions and masquerades and transformations. I mean, very few people saw Zeus. He would come in all sorts of guises to have sex with the mortal women because things were not great with Hera. Anyway, you will see that the header of our program, both for our preview Wednesday night and today's show, is a detail of my painting from last year, which is called Janus Tales of Abisu, and a really fine example of a god or goddess that is repurposed, that basically is morphed and reinvented to satisfy novel human utilities, is Abisu. So he was transcribed and translated in accordance with mortal novel utilities, just as protein and DNA are transcribed and translated. He is both the protector of fish and ocean life and the destroyer of fish and ocean life, and the protector of the fishermen and the hunters of fish and ocean life. And that is a wonderful example of humans who concoct, imagine, invent, pray to, are loyal to gods and goddesses whose very purpose, whose very identities are shifting alongside utility.
Okay. It's interesting because I think what happens is, in any circumstance, we take something from where we were and we use it in a novel way in order to kind of be able to kind of hint at or kind of uncover what those kind of things are that provide the new challenge. So, um, are we in an era agreeable to the implications of novel utility? Means it can exist. Can it potentially appreciate anticipating a new time? Now, I believe that we all can look at things when we have words like the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the modern period, the Industrial Revolution. And at a certain point, we kind of say to ourselves, at what point do the things that held sway in the institutions that basically came to kind of define the way in which we would continue to kind of keep pace with the things that were coming our way, at what point did they become inertial? At what point did they stop allowing us to kind of be able to kind of see our desires and our passions to be able to come to fulfillment? At what point did they fall below that reality? I mean, I use the example, and it's a common example. At the end of the 19th century in art and music, people had become somewhat dissatisfied with the circumstance, and individuals basically kind of took their techniques and their talents, and they basically forged a new way of seeing things. And it wasn't a conscious effort by any one particular individual, but it came to be a flowering that was unrecognized, that was undeniable. I look at the fact that in the 20th century, we look at the fact that, a bunch of people who were playing with phones and TV sets in their mother's basements and backyards basically forged an industry that now is worth trillions. It's trillions, maybe more, if you could even put a kind of numerical value on it. But in terms of the impact it has on our daily lives, just the fact that we can basically talk through this screen and reach people on any number of places is something that I think is kind of a result of the fact that these individuals took it upon themselves to forge something that felt the need to exist, and those desires became manifest. So what are those things that awaken to a new era? Are we in that circumstance? I think I see a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction, which for me, I find positive and hopeful in the fact that we are at that point. So what are the times of novel utility?
Well, I believe the times of novel utility have persevered, but in different concoctions, in dilutions, in different concentrations. I would say it's almost like a scent, like an essence, like a perfume, where you can observe and smell its full strength, and it can undergo many permutations depending on if it exists as vapor in the air, if it is dispersed over water, if it's dripped into the ground. I believe these times have always been there, and I'd like to give some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Okay.
In fact, we talked about something on Wednesday that I want to make sure we don't miss, because it was something that I found incredibly valuable, which was the idea of the scientific essayist. And we're going to talk about that. Beautiful.
That's number
Beautiful.
2. But I'm going to talk about this first because this answers your question specifically. So the idea here is, and I will talk about these 2 things because they're quite key. This is a quote from me, and then I will tell everyone what they are. It is for these 3 staples of human sustenance that times of novel utility evolved fastest and with the most delicious invention. Now, 3 things that have been a persistent constant in human diet and times are bread, cheese, and wine. These have been
Mhm.
around since basically humans have been around in a quasi civilized state.
Mhm.
Now, the bane of human carbohydrate existence is stale bread. It gets stale incredibly quickly.
Mhm.
And there have been, from the 12th century onwards, incredible invention
Mm.
for the repurposing of stale bread. It's a huge part of people's,
I was wondering if that was
yeah,
okay. I was thinking about that myself. Like, yeah, this could be interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So novel utility for stale bread, which is something that every bread eating culture has to deal with. Bread gets stale incredibly fast,
Mhm.
especially bread which existed before the times of preservatives. It would get stale pretty much the day after it was baked,
Mhm.
so it would be stale. There's
Mhm.
a fascinating dish called Poor Knights, called Arme Ritter, that existed in the 15th century. All of this, okay, is coming to one thing, and it's really funny. Poor Knights, Bombay Toast, Gypsy Toast, Pan Perdue in French, the fascinating Deutsches Wörterbuch of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. It is mentioned often,
Mhm.
and the Spanish tortillas, which I might not be pronouncing right, all the way back to the 14th century. These are all what we know as French toast. Yes,
Mhm.
these are all cultural versions, from the Eastern European gypsy toast to the Indian Bombay toast to the actual French moniker for French toast, which was Americanized to French toast. The actual name is Pan Perdue, or bread lost. Lost bread,
Mhm.
because you would be throwing out your
Mhm.
stale bread
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
losing. Bread was your sustenance. Think of think of think of Christ. Think of the loaves and the fishes.
Mhm.
I mean, this is what people ate. So this was a repurposing, taking stale bread and soaking it in everything from eggs to milk to cream to wine, all with things like cardamom and sugar and cinnamon, very, very similar to our French toast, and then cooking it through and serving it with
Mhm.
syrups, sugar syrups, orange blossom syrups, rose water
Mhm.
in the Middle East. I mean, this is just fascinating.
Mhm.
The other thing, and this is right to that point. Do you want to intervene, or
No,
should I
no,
say?
no. I think what's interesting is during these last, I'd say, 10 uh, kind of programs, I've started to
On it.
see kind of fact that there is a desire for me to kind of like further investigate. Not, I mean, again, my investigation is organic in nature, but I
Yeah.
think there's certain kind of animated aspects that have been missing. And I think today I
Right.
was talking about romanticism, and I was
Mhm.
talking about the fact that in a what I would call pathological romanticism, it becomes mawkish and sentimental.
Mhm.
But in a vital or healthy romanticism, it becomes a focus on nature, as similar to um, what Emerson's talking about. However, you always manage to find these incredibly unique and provocative perspectives from which you present these things.
Thank you.
And in fact, I think if you are to say that someone is a kind of like a scientific essayist, I would say that you can see that in me because you basically were the first or the forerunner of that
Thank
in
you.
terms of understanding. I mean, probably kind of descendant of Maeterlinck, but I would say that in that case, I see the fact that I need to work harder
Mm,
on those things
thanks, Steve.
specifically. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I find that some of the most fascinating information can be gleaned in some of the most unexpected and surprising places.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to jump right to Greek wine, which
So let me just
nobody
say,
saw
yeah. So let me
coming.
see.
Yes.
Is
Mhm.
that I think in the reason why I got you the Maeterlinck Book of the Double Garden was
Oh,
because of
yeah, I'll
Portrait of
get
a
to you.
Lady,
Yeah.
and the Portrait of a Lady is really, if anyone wants to know Julie's character,
Mm.
just read The Portrait of a Lady
Please
in
read.
Maeterlinck's Double Garden. In fact, I dedicated that piece to you
Yes,
in
you
my,
did.
In my kind of dedication
I
to the
have
book.
it. I will
I know,
always
I know,
have
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got you a copy too. That way
Yes,
we each
exactly.
have one.
Yeah, but they didn't have Portrait of a Nutcase.
Sorry.
Yeah, he didn't write that essay. I could write it for him. Portrait of an Obsessive Nutcase.
Well, they did. You just haven't read it. It's called The Candle Nut Chronicle.
Oh, I like that.
There is a candle
Yeah.
nut. Anyway, so I jumped to Greek wine. Nobody saw this coming, but this speaks
Greek wine.
Oh no! This is extremely
I
specific.
kind of like it. I thought kosher wine was the lowest we could go, but
no. Well, no.
here we go. Let's go.
Okay, this is historically.
Fortunately for me, I got tea's tea, so I'm like
in green, and I have tea's
Jasmine.
tea and jasmine.
Yeah,
If you
so
want
at
to do a
least-
swap,
at least I don't have to suffer.
Yes, we are always happy when we're drinking tea's tea.
I know I am.
Well, I am too.
No, actually, the green tea I kind of find
It's very
it's
smooth,
yeah.
And it's green.
Yes.
Okay,
And I
so
love green because you're
Yes.
Jade Panda.
I am Jade Panda.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, here is what is fascinating. I went to a wine tasting specifically to taste Retsina, which I've had many times before, but not for many years because I don't drink. Anyway, I'm into food and food history and food culture. But that said, Retsina is a fascinating white wine that is over 2,000 years old. Actually, one of the original wine. It is a resonated wine. And that is not a word that enophiles, didn't see that coming either, that enophiles use when they're talking about winemaking. It just doesn't come up that much. Most people find it abhorrent. I find it fascinating and wonderful, but then I can drink a conifer forest and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to be okay with that because you are drinking pine resin, specifically Aleppo pine resin. Now, all the pines at various altitudes in Greece are not suitable for making Retsina. The Aleppo pine is the only one used. Here is why. This is a phenomenal example of time for novel utility in human history. It is absolutely the best example. So, Greek winemakers used to seal their amphorae with Aleppo pine resin to keep the oxygen out because the amphorae were ceramic, they were permeable, and within a year or less, the wine turned and was not drinkable because of the impact of the oxygen. And the pine resin sealed it extremely well, but imparted a powerful taste to the wine.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing masks that taste.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nothing. It's incredibly strong. It's also like nothing you have ever tasted.
Mm.
And it has a scent.
Right.
Yeah.
I had been
Yeah.
in the Soviet Union in 1990.
Yes, you were.
Everyone had their own alcohol producing mechanism.
This was great.
I have literally tasted everything.
That is true.
Right. And
you probably
the
have
fact
something
that,
very much like this.
The fact that I'm still here is a surprise when I think of some of the things, when I think about how they tasted.
Yeah.
Right? To say that there were things that you would say, I would hope to have died after experiencing that taste.
Surprised you still have your hearing and your sight.
Or exactly. Anyway, so
yes. So what's fascinating is the pine resin had a dual functionality. So when I talk about novel utility, I'd like to propose a new term into your pantheon of terms.
Okay. Right.
A Janus head novel utility. This is a two-faced, two-headed looking in very different directions, anticipating two simultaneous but very different needs. And here is the kicker: they had to have been satisfied simultaneously. Same root, different purposes. And in this case, the Romans came in to conquer. And the Greeks did not want to be conquered. And the Romans themselves had commenced the use of barrels rather than amphorae in the 3rd century AD. And the Romans did not have a taste for resonated wine. In fact, I believe they probably developed wine barrels to avoid resonated wine.
It's interesting. I thought the Scottish people were the only people who tried to kill their enemies with their food. In fact, I mean, I don't know. If you've eaten in Scotland, you realize that like there's a reason why these people, try, and you thought to yourself, are they trying to kill people with this stuff?
Oh, it's ghastly.
Yeah, it is ghastly. Anyway.
Oh yeah. I don't want to. If you want to.
No, I actually want to just say that, like, what happens is, the utility or the desire for utility awakens of a new era as a result of dissatisfaction. So I think this is kind of one of the things that harkens to the fact that I do believe that at this point there is a dissatisfaction. Someone was asking me today, and I said, when I started this project, it wasn't with this intention. It was with something completely different. But over the course of this, I started to sense in our own work in Art Science Complex, in the people that we deal with and the people that we know, a similar sense or senses of that dissatisfaction with the institutions. And as a result, it does seem as if just the same way that at different places, Sartre and Beckett and Picasso and Gertrude Stein and all these people started to kind of congregate to certain places, and certain things started to happen.
Ernst and Dolly and Clay,
exactly. They all did, I do believe that this type of dissatisfaction is going to grow from that dissatisfaction, and that will basically give rise to this thing that we're talking about. What it will be called and where it comes from. But I believe that the idea that the technique that you develop is no longer satisfied by simply just kind of like playing the scales of the inertial kind of like institutional kind of parochialisms that, are kind of laid before you. In fact, I was talking with someone and they were talking about the fact that their very gifted mother, who is a great pianist, had been told when she wanted to improvise and kind of compose her own music that this was not her place. And of course, one of our best friends, has kind of done that herself and has decided that, no, I could play this, but my technique imparts upon me a desire for something more. This dissatisfaction exists. I think the most talented people I see when I go through different fields are deciding that, yeah, I could have a career, but at the same time, there's a part of me that is dissatisfied. Genius is dissatisfied, and it is looking for a new resource. It's looking for it's looking to discover its constitutional circumstance in order to become emancipated into its new era. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said you want to say something.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. So I'd also like to bring up the term removal of necessity. By removing a necessity, you can simultaneously spark change and also seek revenge on your enemies, which is what happens with Retsina. So when the Romans found a way to remove the enological necessity for resin use, the Greeks did not drop it. They developed it in a more robust way, actually. They went full force. And in fact, it's still produced in Greece at quite a brisk clip. There's a very, very funny story which involves a man named Liutprand of Cremona. In 968, he was sent to Constantinople to arrange an incredibly unpopular marriage. And the marriage was between the very unwilling daughter of the late Emperor Romanos II and the heinous future Holy Roman Emperor Otto II. She absolutely did not want to marry him for reasons I'm not sure, but this was a very unpopular thing. He was sent there to initiate it, but instead the court of Nikephoros the second wanted Liutprand gone.
Mm.
How did they get him? With food and retsina. They stuffed a goat, which he hated. He had
goat?
He hated goat. He had a Germanic and Italian palate. He did not like goat. They stuffed it with onions, which he also hated. And
are you kidding me?
And they stewed it in fish sauce.
Should have stewed him.
Yeah, well, they actually did. They actually
Good.
stewed him with retsina, which he said was the most undrinkable wine he had ever tasted. But they didn't just use the Aleppo pine resin. They went whole hog in their quest for novel utilities of driving away an enemy. They added pitch and gypsum and made something that nobody wanted and that was so abhorrent he could not drink it. They also used this to halt the Roman conquest of Greece. The Romans had plundered their wines, infuriating their citizens, who turned to pine resin to both, in the Janus effect, extend their own limited wine stores because they actually liked the retsina used in small quantities, and as a very strong deterrent against their conquerors. And the harsh flavor put off the Romans, and they also killed King Eric of Denmark and Sigurd I of Norway with retsina. Anyway, it was really pretty fascinating.
It's good to know that it's like I thought the Scottish people were the only people who tried to intentionally kill people with their food, including Scottish people. But
it's pretty awful.
All right, so back to this.
Sorry, right? But that was a really interesting story.
No, it is, and I want to kind of talk about the scientific essayist.
Sure.
Because what I think we come to is the fact that the desire of a people comes from what they see as their talents merged with those circumstances with which those talents will be applied. We talked about that, and I kind of referred to, Ortega and the Revolt of the Masses. And I think that this is the time in which we start to see those things. Like I've said in the past, technique is that which you hold most dear to yourself. It is who you are in the manifestation of which you utilize it. So to me, in the case of drawing and model building, and Julie, in your case, in terms of words and images, in other people, in terms of phrases and kind of like, and other things, we start to forge those languages. And I believe that right now, we have a situation where, as the cultural institutions are collapsing, the academic institutions are crumbling, the people become stuck in the isolation of language rather than understanding the kind of like diversity and freedom that emancipates once you have genius. So I think in that case, the potential for the scientific essayist could conceivably always have existed. But in terms of the time that we're entering, which is different than Maeterlinck, Maeterlinck was a scientific essayist in the times of in his times. But what would you say constitutes the nature of the scientific essayist in this moment?
I would say that we're struggling to find those who are capable of being effective scientific essayists. There are many published scientific essays that I read every week in Science, in the journal. Now, some of them are technically essays. They are opinions, but they are all categorized. And I think when you categorize them and you sort scientific essays like playing cards, you are not allowing the writers to think in an interdisciplinary way. You are pigeonholing them, meaning they have a book section and people are writing an essay about a scientific book.
Mm.
Then you have a personal section where they are writing an essay about their personal experiences working in their branch of their field.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a lot of essays that fall under the heading perspectives, which are some of my favorite.
I like the perspectives.
Yeah,
that's
those
my
are
favorite
classic
pieces.
Scientific
Those
essays.
are pieces. Those are pieces I really love. The good ones are the things that I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have in the back the kind of, really heavy, very technical research articles that don't in any way qualify as a scientific essay.
No.
They're very nuts and bolts. They could, but they're highly technical.
Well, I think that's just it. And I think what happens is, as we talked about induction a couple of weeks ago in terms of Whitehead, I think that kind of speculative impulse has been subverted. And I think what happens is those of us who are kind of starting to kind of like see the desire. I mean, for me, the speculative aspect has been the only aspect I ever cared about. But to kind of see in which it's become somewhat ossified has become very tragic for me. And I think that I've always been to the point where, just like in the case of like we talked about the complex, I mean, art science complex, we talked about this with on the program when we were on BronxNet.
Yes,
is that
when they were interviewed
the reason why art science complex has to be stated is because we need to kind of use these words in tandem until the word that replaces them as the unifying word of this vocation as an exercise unindependently comes to fore. So the point is, right now, art science complex is this thing that allows people's understanding of these two separated but unified things to be seen as the one that they actually are. Yeah, go ahead. So.
I think too is having a successful scientific essay demands a point of view. And in today's editorial climate, which is very guarded, very sheepish, very PC, very conscious of what's everyone going to think and say, that works counter to a successful psychological, structure of the scientific essay. It demands a viewpoint. It demands a character and a personality of the writer be present in the essay. Otherwise, it's a straight science journal article, which is great and fine. But I really think in every essay that Maeterlinck wrote, you see Maeterlinck in it, his perspectives, his preferences, his keen observations, his craftings of the analogies, the metaphors, the constraints and the joys that define his world, both natural, scientific, and personal, in a really beautiful intermix, in a beautiful weave, not separated out into little thimbles that are acceptable.
Yeah. I totally understand. I wonder if like what part of that is the fact that like, one of the things that a lot of people concern themselves with, and we hear this from our friends in scientific, who do, scientific papers.
Just a sip. I'm really thirsty.
Is that peer review has become, a difficult place to kind of master, because the idea of dissension, which is something that I think is inherently part of scientific speculation, is avoided. And I think the idea that you could basically offend someone or kind of like make someone be unsettled or kind of like have an individual who kind of goes against you is kind of one of the things that you would assume, especially in a place where things are becoming like ultra orthodox, would be necessary. However, it's basically the opposite. So many people have talked about it, and we're not the first ones to kind of notice it. But this idea of this kind of like the orthodoxy as being an essential part of confinement and conformity. The fact that and in fact, we read this in science,
Mhm.
and we've heard in other places about the idea of agreeability.
Oh God, yeah.
And
That's terrifying.
again, I kind of like remember kind of offending this guy who was, I think he was actually a fairly preeminent scientist, but I kind of like,
Good for you.
well, it wasn't intentional.
There are some people you want to offend.
No,
said
no,
Monty Python,
actually,
or I don't know.
I feel,
I don't know what happened
that he
there,
was a
but-
decent guy, and I didn't really intend to offend him.
I wasn't
But I
there.
talked. No, it was an unfortunate circumstance, but
sorry.
I wasn't going to mince words.
Sorry.
But I talked about the idea of kind of like, a kind of like a kind of like a kind of person who's a management individual,
Mhm.
a kind of like vocational, technical science vocation.
Mhm.
So I kind of talked about the fact that there was no science, and these were just kind of vocational institutions at this
Mhm.
point, and all you were doing was fulfilling the needs of someone else. Your speculative aspect was basically taken away.
Mhm.
I can't remember the term at the point, but it's something like scientific.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I wasn't present.
Technical service workers.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I
your
basically
term.
replaced the
Yeah.
idea of scientists with technical service worker.
There are people
And
that are just doing.
They were.
that.
No,
I
but
mean, there are
I
plenty
kind
of
of I
people.
said that, that was the kind
It's
of
not
thing.
untrue.
No, and he took offense to that, and I basically kind of defended it. But I do believe there was a point where a technical service worker was the kind of thing in which I felt as if the desires of the individual were taken away. And I think part of that is the fact that very much scientists are confined to the scientific institution.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is given the fact that with so much in the last 400 years has been the testament to the genius of the people in the scientific kind of fields to forge for us incredible devices, not just for insight, but the insight itself. The
Mhm.
places we can look at, the places that we can see, the places we can begin to understand in the universe and everything around it,
Mhm.
right, and ourselves included, has been astonishing. And it should never be, kind of like infringed upon. But unfortunately, right now, it's somewhat static. And I think the technical service work is something that happens in research. And it's like, in fact, it's destroyed the academies. But
Oh yeah.
I think it's something that we have to kind of acknowledge and stop kind of blaming everyone but ourselves. I mean, I don't want to, kind of say, I don't think it's my fault, but I just looked at the fact that for me, it was not something I was going to continue to kind of like be part of. Anyway, so as we're getting to the end of the hour here, let's kind of wrap things up with last ideas. My little one.
Thanks. Well, I want to see the thinker in their written thoughts. And that is not something that most people want to see. They want the words on the page, the images on the screen to be anonymous, to be sterile, to be shorn of the first person narrative. They want the I to be cut out brutally of that equation, whether it's a written equation or a visual equation. And that is why Maeterlinck is such a great writer and thinker. He was present in all of his scientific essays, his operas, his librettos. He wrote of novel utilities in nature and science, literary framing of adaptation, prose of metamorphoses and epigenetic utilities, and everything from old-fashioned flowers to drama and theater, portrait of a lady and the nature of women, bees and ants, many, many entomological things. And he was very strong, very present, always in every word, in every sentence. So it was not washed of the author. I don't want to read something that is scrubbed clean like a clean room in a lab of the wordsmith of the author. Yeah. Would you like to?
Yeah. So I think what happens is, what are those things? I leave this as the question.
Yeah.
Just the same way that at the beginning of the 20th century, I mean, we see things like right in architecture. We see things like the people in Paris and in the arts and the science and arts and music. And then, at I think, let's see, was it? Oh yeah, I think the interpretation of dreams is written in 1900.
Yeah, it was
Right.
pretty
So it was like, and
early.
I think,
Yeah.
but I mean, again, this is
Yeah.
the beginning of the 20th century.
But yeah, sure.
So, at this point, again, 1905, Einstein revolutionizes physics. So the beginning of the 20th century was a time in which things really came to a point where we were starting to see the beginning of a new age, a new era. And things were kind of getting to the point where people who became dissatisfied and went different ways because they felt as if the institutions didn't support them. So we've come to this moment once again. I don't think we should continue to allow ourselves to be blamed for this dissatisfaction. And we have a right to kind of forge our way through the things that become interesting and compelling to us. And I can understand the fact that many people have a lot invested in the things that they have built. And I have no problem with them continuing along those lines. They could be right, I could be wrong. But the point is, I think that the need is to allow people to be able to go off and kind of try for themselves what they think means something. So in that case, I believe we're at an epic point of novel utility. The innovations of engineering have made it such that the society is completely different than it had been even 25 years ago, even 10 years ago. And as a result, the opportunities are laying there and not being kind of like used. So the purposefulness by which we forge this new environmental architectural reality is ours to generate. And I think that we look to ourselves and we look to our techniques to manifest images that can basically become compelling arguments for this new time.
Great. That's beautifully said.
Thank you, P.
I'd like to quickly end with the paradox
Say.
because it's very important. I will talk about microfabrication in organic architecture at a later date. I will talk about micro texture experiments being used by NASA and DARPA. But I want to just say this: death before use. So the afterlife of white rot fungi is their novel utility potentiality.
Nice.
Death before use, not after use.
Nice. I like that.
And their
Right.
only use is their afterlife.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's see. What do we have for next week?
Yeah,
So the title
what do
for
we
next
have?
week, let's see. The times of the potential to generate novel utility. So we'll talk about the things that we
start
see.
with that,
Perfect. So we'll talk about the
Mhm.
things that we see, the things that we know. In the meantime, we'll kind of see you on Wednesday night, and we can start to talk about
Do
that.
you need a hint?
Nope. All right. So, all right. Oh,
nice.
also, we didn't even say yes.
Yes.
Thank you to Tease Tea. We love you guys.
Thank you
We're always
so
there.
much.
Yeah. Thank you for all your great gifts.
Always
Tease Tea.
drinking.
Everyone should be drinking Tease Tea.
Everyone should be.
Yes. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's the benefit of all for us to keep it just like that.
Microfabrication.